A New York court says Rudy Giuliani repeatedly lied, and because of that, he can no longer practice law. I want to get straight to CNN's Paula Reed. So, Paula, why did the court rule the way it did?
Dana, this is a stunning development for a man who was once one of the nation's top law enforcement officials. Now, in its opinion, this state appellate panel concluded that there is uncontroverted evidence that Giuliani communicated demonstrably false and misleading statements to courts, to lawmakers, and to the public at large in his capacity as a lawyer for former President Trump and the Trump campaign in connection with Trump's failed effort at re-election in 2020. They concluded that what he did is a threat to the public interest, which is why he has now been suspended from the practice of law. Now, Dana, it is not easy to have your license suspended this way. This all came about after the bar received multiple complaints, conducted an investigation, and came to this result. But we're actually expected to see Mr. Giuliani in just a few hours. He is due to appear in federal court here in Washington, D.C. to defend against a defamation suit brought by Dominion Voting Systems. So we may have the chance to ask him to react to this incredible development. He first joined the bar in 1969. He's had a lengthy legal career. He was in the Justice Department for a while. Of course, he was famously the mayor of New York. And then he's been representing former President Trump in various legal issues. So this is really a pretty stunning way to cap off what historically has been a pretty glittering career. But over the past several years, he has increasingly had more and more legal issues. In addition to the defamation suit, this suspension, he also has an ongoing federal investigation in New York.
Joining me right now is CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig. For more on this, Elie, what's your reaction?
Well, Kate, this is a new low in really a stunning fall for Rudy Giuliani. As Paula said, there was a time, I know it's hard to remember now, when Rudy Giuliani was one of the most respected lawyers and prosecutors in the country. He was the head of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, an office I worked in several decades later. And now he's been kicked out temporarily of practicing law in New York State. That's a very big deal. And as Paula said, this is based on very clear-cut findings by a panel of state judges. This isn't just sort of other lawyers or people who maybe arguably are partisan. This is a group of judges who found that he made demonstrably false statements meant to prop up the big lie of election fraud in order to promote Donald Trump's interests and endangering the public.
How unusual is this?
Very unusual. I mean, I don't personally know anybody who's ever been suspended from practice like this in New York. It certainly happens, but it's very, very rare. Lawyers, look, the fact is, can get away with quite a bit. I mean, you're a lawyer. Your job is to zealously represent your client. A lot of times your client maybe has done wrong. But what you cannot do as a lawyer is just lie. You cannot make demonstrably false, as the court said, and dangerous statements, particularly if those statements could endanger the public interest, as this court found Rudy Giuliani did. So this does not happen every day by any stretch. This is a very rare thing and a very extreme thing for the court to do.
Look, and Elie, Rudy Giuliani is under criminal investigation, but this really isn't related to that. This is about Giuliani pushing President Trump's big lie.
Yeah, this is completely separate. This is one of many problems Rudy Giuliani has right now. He's now been suspended from practicing law in the state of New York. He also separately is under criminal investigation by that same federal prosecutor's office that he used to lead, that I mentioned before, the Southern District of New York, relating to his work on behalf potentially of Ukraine, relating to that scandal. So Rudy Giuliani's got all sorts of problems. This is another one to add to the list.
Can he appeal to get his license back?
So this is a temporary suspension of Rudy Giuliani, and the order says if Rudy Giuliani wants to essentially appeal this, wants to have a full-out hearing, he has the right to request that. So we'll see if he requests that or not. I mean, that hearing could get really ugly for him. So he'll have to make the decision, do I just accept the sort of temporary suspension and let it remain in place, or do I fight it? But then he'll have a whole hearing. I'm not sure so sure he wants to go down that path, given the rulings that we've already seen.
Look, want to venture to guess how Rudy Giuliani is going to respond to all of this?
On the one hand, Rudy Giuliani is a fighter and always likes to fight back. On the other hand, maybe he's smart enough to realize that he's going to be picking a losing fight here.
Abby, I'm going to start with you and read something else from the document, because this is about Rudy Giuliani, but it's also even more so about the big lie. So this document says, One only has to look at the ongoing present public discord over the 2020 election, which erupted into violence, insurrection, and death on January 6, 2021 at the U.S. Capitol, to understand the extent of the damage that can be done when the public is misled by false information about the elections. That is pretty damning and very accurate.
Yeah, 100% accurate. I mean, there are consequences to these lies. And for so many months, the president and his allies, chief among them, Giuliani, have been lying with impunity about all kinds of things. And then doing so in legal proceedings, you have to wonder, is there any sort of recourse for that? I mean, can someone say that they're a lawyer, practice law in this country while also doing something that is provably false? I think this court ruling makes that clear, that there are consequences for Giuliani and probably for others as well. There are defamation cases. There's real damage that was done, not just to lives, but also to livelihoods for the companies that were slandered, frankly, by a web of conspiracies and lies that were made up out of whole cloth by the president and his allies.
I think for Trump's allies especially, you have to wonder whether they're sitting there now thinking, how far am I willing to go to push Trump's lies about the election? Especially some of these guys who are running in primary races, trying to run for higher office. Are you willing to lose your license? Are you willing to lose your Twitter account in the name of these lies that the former president has spread? So, maybe they'll be thinking twice now, seeing that there are repercussions.
And it's not just, there are federal courts that are now starting to sentence some of those in the January 6th riot. And Royce Lamberth, a judge appointed by Ronald Reagan, was a real pain in the butt to Bill Clinton's administration. Yesterday, in sentencing one of those rioters, singled out the congressional Republicans who are trying to rewrite the January 6th history. He said, I don't know what planet they were on, the Republicans who are trying to defend this. And he said that that attack was, quote, intended to halt the very functioning of government. So the whole legal system is now starting to shift.
Well, I think what's so stunning about this is that when you cover Trump, and as a lot of us have for several years, you realize that people around him think that they're untouchable. They start to think that more and more, the more they're in his inner circle. And it is something that happens with people in the White House, people on Capitol Hill, his attorneys. They think that they can do and say whatever they want. And because they're in this orbit that he operates in, there are no consequences for what they say and for what they do. This is showing that's not true. But also, just to step back, there are so many crazy things that happen that I think it's easy to not be surprised by something like this happening. This is incredible. Rudy Giuliani has been a barred attorney for decades. He was the mayor of New York through 9/11 who helped steer the city out of that. To see the rise in that way and the fall in this way is amazing, that the former president's former attorney no longer can represent his clients in a court of law, now does not have his law license, is incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible, but let's be honest. I mean, this is kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. Rudy Giuliani has been doing unethical things on behalf of his client, Donald Trump, for a long time.
The first impeachment.
So much so that Trump was impeached twice over these kinds of shenanigans. But I also want to just say, to your point, PK, about Republicans on Capitol Hill, I think that there's a sentiment among some Republicans, people like Ted Cruz and, Rand Paul and others, who kind of like flirt, Congressman Stefanik, who flirt on this line and say, well, there were irregularities. We don't think that election officials should have been able to change these rules. Those are all kind of euphemisms for the broader lie framework that all of this is sitting on top of. It's not okay to just say, oh, well, there were irregularities and we have questions. The questions are all based on the lie that Rudy Giuliani just got disbarred for.
And the most important thing is, well, one of the most important things is the legal realm that we're talking about, but then it's the political realm. I mean, you guys walk the halls of Congress every day. I mean, do you think that the members who are propagating the big lie are going to care that there is a real life consequence if you are someone like Rudy Giuliani? Will that trickle down to people who rely on voters and not, the court of law?
Yeah, I think they're probably going to look at this, Dana, and just say, well, that's because he was playing a lawyer. He was playing the role of lawyer. We're over here in politics and we get to do lies and distortions for a living, and there's no legal bar that says you've crossed a line. You only have your voters who are you're responsive to. So, I mean, we'll see. Look, the House Republican Conference continues to be very much in the former president's camp. They are, the Senate Republican Conference is very different. They are, they're 11 of them, I think, are down at the White House right now meeting with President Biden. They're talking about bipartisanship. The House Republicans, they're still right there with the former president.